Welcome to our second segment of this afternoon's program. It's Sunday, the 30th of January, 2022. It is now 1:33 p.m. in the studio. I'm your host, Kieran Murdoch. In this half hour, we'll be hearing from the Democratic National Alliance's team leader in St. Peter, Ms. Chaneil Imhoff. Initially, she was meant to participate in a debate in a panel format here on the big issues this Sunday, with a representative from the ABLP and one from the UPP. But the event was cancelled after the participants from the ABLP and the UPP withdrew for different reasons on Friday. I will state publicly that the big issues remains open to reorganizing that debate if and when the three participants are agreed upon doing so. But as it stands, neither the agreed ABLP participant or the agreed UPP participant has made it known to us when next they may become available. So on this segment, as I said, we hear from the Democratic National Alliance about approaches it would take in the constituency of St. Peter. And later on in the half hour, we'll also discuss the nature of our political discourse here in Antigua and Barbuda, and we'll ask the question of why it is often rare for opposing parties to meet each other for frank and honest discussions in a public forum. Ms. Chaneil Imhoff, as I said, the Democratic National Alliance's team leader in the constituency of St. Peter. She joins us on Zoom, and we're happy to have her with us this afternoon. Good afternoon to you, Ms. Imhoff. How are you doing? We'll have to unmute your microphone there.
Good afternoon, Thank you so much for having me.
Sorry to pause you, Ms. Imhoff, but we're very, very much barely hearing you. Almost not at all. You're very, very low.
Is that better?
Ever so slightly. I'm not sure if you increase your
Is that better?
Yes, much clearer now. Much clearer. Thank you so much.
Excellent. All right, no problem. I was telling you, thank you for having me. It is always a pleasure to be on the big issues with you.
Let me ask you, the issues, of course, that we would have dealt with were very, very basic issues. The first would have been the issue of economy and particularly unemployment. Of course, we're talking about business opportunities, employability, and the effect of COVID-19. COVID-19, as we all know, has had a very serious and detrimental effect on all economies around the world, particularly tourism-dependent economies such as Antigua and Barbuda. And many have struggled to find ways, even before COVID-19, to increase their household income or to find better paying employment. I'm curious, within the context of COVID-19 and the number of strains that there are on the economy at this time, were your party to form a government after the next election, what would it do to try and increase employment, business opportunities, sort of relieve the economic pressure on the people, particularly in St. Peter, for example?
All right, so as you rightfully said, COVID-19 has put extreme strain on all of our sectors, economy, health, everything, right? And specifically in St. Peter, I would go a bit broad first, and then specifically in St. Peter, I think that it has shown us as well that we have to diversify. We have to. It's not if, but, or maybe at this point in time. I think that this pandemic and its effect on our economy, on our tourism product, etc., is a wake-up call, and should be a wake-up call to anybody who is serious about governance, that we should diversify. So the Democratic National Alliance is all about being new, fresh, and dynamic. So industries such as the orange economy, which deals with creatives, the arts, and tapping into the skills and talents of our citizens and residents, is absolutely right up there in terms of priority, right? Additionally, developing a proper entrepreneurial ecosystem is very important. We have many people here who have small businesses that cropped up due to the pandemic, after they had to go home for whatever reason. They said to themselves that, listen, I'm going to do something for myself. And we have to ensure that they have the tools and the resources necessary to build those businesses. Because although they may seem small, all of those little things add up to help ensure that we have a stable economy. We cannot continue to rely on just one thing. We have too much skills and talents within this country, and specifically within the St. Peter constituency, to do that. Because historically, Parm is one of the only places, I think the only village or whatever, which is still referred to as a town, because that is what it is. It is a town. It is a coastal community that has been neglected for the past 20 plus years. And I say 20 plus to just illustrate how long it has been, because I am 20 plus. So from the time I was small growing up, visiting my extended family, etc., up until now, not much has changed in that regard. That is a community that is right and ripe for that sort of redevelopment that should be people focused and people centered.
Let me ask, just to follow up on this point before we jump to the next. We often hear talk about diversification of the economy, but the issue with that becomes, of course, investment, and we rely quite a bit on foreign direct investment, and of course, foreign investors are pretty concerned with investing in areas where they can securely feel that they're going to get an industry off the ground and they're going to make a profit. And tourism tends to be one of those things. So often when we talk about diversification, the question arises, where is the solid investment going to come from to support that sort of move? Ms. Imhoff?
Is that for Chaneil or
I
Imhoff?
I'm
That's for you, Ms.
here.
Imhoff. That's
Are
for you,
you
Ms. Imhoff.
are you hearing me?
Yes, I am. You got the question?
Excellent. Could you repeat for me? You went dead for a second.
Sorry about that. Might have been a
Technology.
technical issue. No, the
No.
investment. I was saying we often rely on foreign direct investment, and in terms of tourism, that is an area which foreign investors are often more comfortable getting into, more assured that they will see a return on their investment. So when we talk about diversification and broadening the base of our economy in terms of expanding other industries, the question arises, where will the investment come from? And whether or not foreign investors will be open to investing in other sectors of our economy.
That's where we create sectoral linkages, Kieran. Um, and it's important to note that we're not saying, we're going to do away with tourism, because a lot of persons like to latch on that and say, oh, so what are you going to do then? That is not the case. Diversity means having more than one. And in having that more than one, you create these sectoral linkages. So between tourism, agriculture, that same orange economy, etc. And the Democratic National Alliance has policies that will encourage alternative industries such as TVET right from within our schools. Because many times people don't learn on the same level, or they learn very differently, and we have to nurture those types of learners from day one. And doing something like that will ensure that it's much easier for us to create these sectoral linkages to ensure that these investments have a proper return.
On the issue of our physical infrastructure and our housing. That, of course, is a problem in many of our communities here in Antigua and Barbuda. To some extent, we inherited that situation historically, and to some other extent, we are responsible for not necessarily policing our development in the way that we should, since we've been in control of our own governance. Basic utilities, I mean, throughout every administration, water has been a problem, electricity is an on and off problem, affordable housing is something that successive governments have worked on in different ways, but many have not been fully and totally satisfied in the extent to which varied and affordable housing is made available through the cooperation with the public sector in Antigua and Barbuda. So that is. There was a lot of disturbance there. Sorry about that, folks. So the question is, what would the Democratic National Alliance do in terms of affordable housing and improving infrastructure?
Okay, so for affordable housing and improving infrastructure, we have two policies that I can get into. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to try to be as brief as possible, right? So in terms of affordable housing, the DNA's housing policy is a three-tiered policy. Deals with low income housing, middle income, of course, high income housing, right? And what that will do is it opens the housing market to everyone, because our motto is prosperity for all, not just for some. Because many times, a lot of these housing projects, etc., they target a specific they target a specific demographic. The cost is not affordable for the average person. So we have to ensure that the average person who is not making as much as persons who are being targeted now are also in the loop when it comes to that. Because at the end of the day, everyone cannot always be in the same position as everyone else. But as a responsible government, when it comes to basic needs like housing and infrastructure, we have to make sure that policies are in place and programs are in place to deal with the regular, everyday man. Now, when it comes to infrastructure and maintenance, because maintenance is a huge thing that we don't take seriously here. We build something or we create something and we just leave it there. There's no maintenance, there's nothing like that. Now, one of the things that the DNA is extremely passionate about is decentralizing government through parish councils. Now, parish councils will be made up of persons within the communities, within the parishes, who have the capabilities to ensure that these things get done. Because right now, people are fed up of throwing up water to bathe. I know I definitely am. Driving, you have to get a whole dump truck to drive out of your yard. I mean, it's frustrating. And at some point, we have to realize that the systems that we have are broken. But what can we do to fix them? We as people have to be the ones to drive this home and to ensure that we make these parish councils work for us, because that takes away that power that those MPs have to say, well, 2 days before election, I'm going to fix your road. I hope you're going to vote for me. No, those are things that you should already be doing. So by doing that and ensuring that these basic facilities like infrastructure, street lighting, street naming, house numbering, small things like that that really do actually matter to a lot of people are put in the hands of people who actually care, who are actually affected by it, and who are non-politically affiliated. So the work actually gets done. It's not about votes and doing anything just to appease anyone anymore. We are encouraging persons to be a part of parish councils, become parish councillors, up your leadership skills, up everything, because at the end of the day, the more qualified and skilled people we have running anything in this country, the better it is for everyone involved.
And my very last question to you directly would have been very briefly on the issue of community development, just to get a sense of what sort of perspective you have of community development, particularly, let's say, for example, in St. Peter, in terms of the level of civic and private sector involvement in different groups, different organizations that sort of work cooperatively for the betterment of the community. Are you satisfied with the level of community development in St. Peter, and what would you want to do there?
Can I say something?
Yeah, sure, Carl. Go ahead.
Can I say something just before Mr. Imhoff answers this question? I really could not let this opportunity pass without offering what I think is a slight bit of a scolding, but also a bit of an encouragement for us to really take the idea of political debates and political discussion in this country more seriously. I think these are very sensible, very appropriate, and very logical questions to ask the candidates in any election cycle. Ms. Imhoff is clearly holding her own and delivering her party's policies quite clearly. And I think a real opportunity was missed to hear from the other political parties, the other perspectives, and to have a real serious engagement. And I just really want to acknowledge this, and I really want to say to individuals, not to the specifics of this particular situation, but to say to broadly say to people who are politically aspirant and to anybody who are going to put themselves forward to run for an election, that a basic requirement of being a politician is the ability to speak and to debate. So it's a fundamental requirement. And I think that the idea of being shielded from the media by party bosses, I'm not saying it's happening in this situation, but the idea of not wanting to expose your hand and shielding candidates and being afraid is, to my mind, not helpful. If you want to be a politically aspirant person, a very core requirement, I mean, I wouldn't show up to a court of law if I couldn't debate the law. I wouldn't show up to a medical practitioner, to the doctor's office if I couldn't understand human biology. A very core requirement of being able to be a politician or political leader is the ability to debate public policy. To sit down and talk about, I am running for constituency X, my party plans to do X, Y, Z if elected, these are our plans, these are our proposals. And I think that to have this engagement, and what is worse, is that the people who are running, and I'm going to be specific in this context, the people who are running in St. Peter's constituency, with the exception of one, are young people, I think below the age of 35. And here's a perfect opportunity to display the talents of our youth, right? To see what more young people have to say on very important issues. I don't think that there's much hope, sadly, for the old generation to come into the same program, particularly if it's in a station for which there's issues. But there's certainly an opportunity to change political culture among particularly younger people. So I really hope that the offer by the other parties is taken up at some point in the future, and the schedules will clear at some point. Because these are very, I mean, we're having a basic and echo chamber right now because we can't hear cross-party discussions, debates, rebuttals. I mean, these are important things. I mean, Chaneil Imhoff would have come through the debating from way back when. She's part of the youth parliament. She's not unfamiliar with this kind of thing.
Let
If
me
you really want to
let me
get
jump
it,
in here, guys.
if you
Let me
really
jump
want
in
to
here.
get into,
Let me jump in here because
please do that.
yeah, I was saying let me jump in because we were going to address this topic with the latter 15 minutes of the thing until 2 o'clock. But since we've already gotten into it, Chaneil, I hope you don't mind if I sort of dump that last question about community development. I mean, you could address it to some extent, but I would also shift to ask you about your views on our political discourse here in Antigua and Barbuda.
Not a problem. I can give you 30 seconds. And Kyla, we go way back to junior cabinet days. If you know, you know, right? So in terms of community development and involvement, etc., I would say that so St. Peter is made up of quite a few communities, notably Paramtown, Fitches Creek, Gunthorpe Estate, Vernon's Weirs, Blackman, etc. It's one of the largest constituencies geographically, has over 3,000 electors, right? And outside of a few communities, pieces of painters, Fitches Creek, etc., we don't see a lot of community engagement and involvement. The Fitches Creek Residents Association is a prime example of what great community involvement and engagement can be. And I think other areas in the constituency can benefit from whatever blueprint that they have there. They have a lot of community pride. They have a lot of engagement with persons within the community. Everybody knows everyone, and there's a level of safety and cooperation, etc. I always look forward to their events because they're always very well put together and run by the people within the communities. Now, for a place like Paramtown, for instance, where, as I said, it is a town, it has these amazing amenities like football fields, basketball courts, etc. I think there's much to be desired in terms of what we have been given over the last 20 plus years. There's so much more that can be done by the people within the community, and of course by the representative who was elected to represent. It doesn't make any sense to elect somebody to represent you when you only see them when it's election time. They're not doing what they're supposed to do, and they're focusing on the wrong things, you know? So I think there's much to be desired, and putting forward, and I have to agree with Colin here, putting forward these ideas by myself is not exactly helpful to have other voices so we can, even if we're political opponents, bounce ideas off of each other. Because at the end of the day, if what your true intention is to improve the community, you should be able to work with whoever is there, politics aside, to ensure that the constituency gets the best representation possible.
And to the issue of our political discourse here in Antigua and Barbuda, we don't often have situations, and I'm not specifically speaking about the event that was planned for today. In general, in Antigua and Barbuda, across various election cycles, we have not often had situations where multiple parties meet in the same public forum, and more specifically, speak honestly and frankly, because that really is the critical thing, because we have had situations where persons do meet in public forums from different parties, but it can be quite loud. And quite a lot of rhetoric, more of an entertainment than sort of a meaningful conversation. Why do you think that is, Ms. Imhoff? And then I'll ask Mr. Knight the same question.
I think that our politics needs to be mature a little bit more. I think we're still pretty much stuck where we were in the 1970s, 80s, where it's very tribal and divisive. Because yes, we have the main political parties. All of us have our own radio shows. we have our own, niches, we have our base, etc. But those aren't the things that actually win an election. And you're not given an opportunity to really talk to other people or hear other perspectives, because it's sort of a thing where I grew up in a house where everybody supported one particular party, and that is all I know. So I'm not gonna get out of that. And that comes from persons really not knowing how the political process should work, not how ours works, because that's not how it's supposed to work. How the political process should work. So I think a lack of education on that, and or political immaturity and divisiveness doesn't augur well for these types of conversations. They usually sometimes devolve into shouting matches, and that does not help anyone.
And Mr. Knight, on the question of why we traditionally don't see a lot of coming together in the same sort of forum, what would you say in terms of Antigua and Barbuda's political
Yeah, I mean,
discourse?
so I mean, beyond the point of maturity, which is well put, I think that the idea is that there's a lack of well, there are a couple of reasons. One of which is a lack of trust, right? So I mean, I think that politicians generally don't want to be ambushed in any setting where they're going to be asked questions, particularly when they don't have control over what is being asked, right? And so there's this idea of I don't want this to turn into a free for all where I'm going to leave myself exposed necessarily. But I get that that's a very real fear. But the idea of also, exposing your hand too early, giving your opponents a leg up. I have been, part of a team that put together a debate in this country, and one of the biggest issues was, and we were told so by the general secretary of one political party, you never ever give your opponents a platform they can get on their own. So I think from the strategizing point of view, they have their reasons. But the idea is, and I think if you look at social media, you look at what is being discussed, people have an appetite. This is not just a matter of whether it is morally the right thing to do. There is a reason why you should want to do this, right? Even if you're thinking purely strategically, there is an appetite for it. People are asking for it. They want to hear more of these kinds of discussions, and it gives you an opportunity, for example, to say that you're letting the DNA get a platform to come in and talk about all the things that they want to do, and you're missing an opportunity to be able to respond in real time, to critique their policies and to put them on the defensive. Here's an offer, you're giving them free airtime. Right? Why would you want to do that? You should be able to come on a program. I agree that certain topics shouldn't be discussed. Like, there's very sensitive issues surrounding the prime minister and rent and all those kind of things. But a very simple debate, like, you're running for a constituency, what are your plans for the constituency? To my mind, and this is not a polarizing kind of discussion that's going to engender too much animosity. And I think for young people especially, to come on. I mean, I pointed out that the people in St. Peter's are all under the age of 40, maybe under the age of 35. To come on and have a discussion. My name is X. This is what I plan to do. That's a very simple thing to do. It should be a very simple thing to do. And I think to respond to the things that Miss Imhoff is saying, right? To say, well, you know what, this can't work, and this is why this can't work. You are giving the people pipe dreams. You should be able to defend yourself. You should be able to
Right.
debate. You should look forward, quite frankly, opportunities to go on in the air and not get into shouting matches, but to get into debates. We used to enjoy junior cabinet and those things because there's an opportunity to debate with your opponents. And I'm not particularly certain why we're having people of political generation who do not like the idea of engaging with their opponents in the context of office. It's kind of what the job requires. So instead of using social media to throw jabs and throw barbs and engage in these kind of things, why not come on to these kinds of programs? Yes, I agree. We should make it as neutral as possible, controlled as possible. But have, like, what is your plan for the constituency? That's a very simple thing. And I think that we should have more of these things happen. And I would encourage people who are serious to continue to engage in this kind of way. It's helpful, and I don't think it's politically damaging in any way.
Ms. Imhoff, do you think we and I have to make this question really brief. Do you think we tend to prefer the rhetoric, the innuendos, the allegation in terms of how we practice our political discourse? And not only that, but we do as well get handicapped sometimes by I think by the landscape of media. I mean, media houses have become, well, not have become, but have been and have become extremely partisan, so that everybody sort of has their own outlet and preaches to the converted, and there's not a lot of neutral ground. Um, But what do you think
Yeah.
about our preference for rhetoric as opposed to, sensible conversations?
I don't think we prefer it. I think we are just used to it. Because when somebody comes with speaking actual sense and not rhetoric, people are very receptive to that. People are very receptive to that. But they've been so used to the rhetoric that when somebody says somebody's going on like that, somebody's, giving pipe dreams, whatever, that's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, another day, another dollar. Same thing, same old, same old. So we're used to it. I don't think we prefer it. And I think that from the response of the general public, not just people in St. Peter, but the general public to the idea of us having this sort of engagement here, it was amazing. It was overwhelming, and people on all sides of the divide would have called and said, you know what, I don't necessarily support X, Y, and Z, but I am eager to hear what all of you have to say, because this is something new, this is something different. And I think that given the opportunity, that persons would actually prefer these types of engagements over the rhetoric. Of course, you have to have the rallies and the motorcades and firing up your base and all of that good stuff, but you have to be able to strike a balance as well, right? Because we're not saying do it at 100% because people love that. I also still enjoy things like that. But then at the end of the day, we have to be able to have these conversations as well. These are super important, especially if you want to change the political landscape in Antigua and Barbuda. Is that the last question, Kieran? Because I have one last thing I would love to say
Well, I wanted to throw it
to the
over
people.
to. You go ahead. But I'll throw it over to Carla Knight afterwards.
Okay, could you throw it over to Colin and come back to me?
Sure, Mr. Knight. On that question, particularly how
Yeah,
the
so
media landscape and the availability of neutral ground sort of affects how conversations between political parties takes place.
you know what I mean. You don't need me to tell you that we have an issue with that. I mean, you know what the job is and how rough it is. I have worked in the media and it is real rough, and certainly the issue also is that even when you try to be a very sort of serious impartial guy, the very fact of being able to push back on policies makes you seem tainted. So the idea is you shouldn't critique me, you shouldn't ask tough questions, you shouldn't bring up controversial issues. But then if you don't want that, then you do not want a media landscape in general. I mean, the idea of, and this is what I want to say as well, if you want a profession, please understand what the profession is going to entail, right? If you want to be a politician, you're going to get media scrutiny, you're going to get tough questions, you're going to get people talking about you, you're going to get the press coming to you to ask questions. You're going to be in. This is something you have to be prepared for, and the thin skinness of our political climate, I think, is part of the reason why we don't get more of this kind of engagement. Not that we don't really have serious journalists who I think can be trustworthy and impartial. I think we do. I think you're one of them, if I may say so myself. I think that, but the issue is that we have very thin skin, so you can't talk about me because I'm the minister. How dare you question me? How dare you raise a question about something like it? It is not good enough. We have to be serious enough. And sometimes you listen to things on the radio, people talking about you left, right, and center, and you just turn off the radio and say, "Stops." Right? This is what public life demands. And I think fundamentally in the issue of engagement, look, if you do not like to debate and talk, you have to go to Parliament and talk for an hour on the budget. You're going to have a real rough time if you can't debate. Please, please, these things are very serious. Get comfortable with them. They're part and parcel of what political life demands. And that's what I have to say on that.
Ms. Imhoff, you can end us off briefly.
All right. Thank you so much. And Colin, I agree with you 110%. So to close off, I'd just like to say to the persons who are listening, who would have given me a lot of encouragement, kind words, everything. Thank you so much to the people of St. Peter. I hope you were listening. I hope you have heard me. And even further, I know I didn't get to touch on everything I wanted to touch on today. Would have prepared for something a little bit different, but that's fine. You can find out more about all that I have said today and even more at chaneilimhoff.com/issues. So all of the issues I would have discussed today are pretty much discussed in depth on the website. There's a little document you can download as well. You can take a read, follow me on social media to keep up with what is happening with me, the campaign, the Democratic National Alliance as well. And I promised everyone an announcement, right? So one of the questions that you asked earlier, and I was hoping to make the announcement at that time, is in terms of the business community, entrepreneurial ecosystem, all of that. So these are buzzwords that a lot of people throw around just because they think it's what people want to hear, but they don't action it. Now, I am a problem solver. I don't believe in just talking and not putting anything forward, right? So, as of literally right now, you can log on to connectstpeter.com. And if you're a business owner, registered in the St. Peter constituency, if you live in Parham, Piers, Weirs, Vernons, Gunthrops, Painters, any of those areas in the St. Peter constituency, you are free to log on, register your business on the website, and on there, you'll not only be able to, reach a wider audience and all of those things, but you'll have access to some resources from local, regional, and international mentors. So on branding, marketing, accounting, bookkeeping, anything that you need to develop your small business into something great, you can find here. Because I believe that
We're gonna have
I don't have
to.
to be in office.
Yeah, we have to
I don't
tie
have
it
to
up.
be in office to help
We're about
anyone.
4 minutes over into the next segment, Shani. We have to wrap
No
it up.
problem. Thank you so much. But that's it. But I don't have to be in office to do something. They can connect on connectstpeter.com. All my information is there, and feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for having me, Kieran. It is always a pleasure.
Of course, you just heard the voice of Chaneil Imhoff, the Democratic National Alliance's team lead in St. Peter, and we were, of course, as well joined on this segment by Mr. Khaled Knight, political and socioeconomic affairs commentator. Thanks to both of you for joining us this afternoon.